Good afternoon, everyone. This is Shivani Malhotra, co-founder and CEO of Positive Vibes Consulting. And welcome to yet another session of Leadership Spotlight series. As you all know, in every Leadership Spotlight series episode, we bring to you insights by super achievers who have done stellar work in their respective fields and have demonstrated exemplar leadership and who continue to add tremendous value to the fraternity. And today I have a really dynamic, inspiring, and an immensely respected industry leader and a great human being, Rajesh Padmanabhan. Please join me in welcoming Rajesh today. Rajesh, a very, very warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Shivani. Absolutely delighted to be here and conversing with you. I hope I'm able to match the energy level of yours.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure it's going to be a very energizing session for both of us and for the audience here. Now comes the most interesting part. It's a privilege to introduce Rajesh to our audience today. He has one of the most impressive profiles I have ever seen. So allow me to share it with all of you. Rajesh is an influential senior business transformation leader and a Matrix global professional who has done 7 roles in 7 varied industries to his credit. He started off his career with handling systems on mainframes, became a corporate banker, ran P&Ls, executed corporate strategy, handled institutional businesses of SMEs, SAP functional business consulting, and finally global HR. He's been in global roles for over 3 decades and managed diverse cross-cultured teams across North America, Latin America, Europe, Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and APAC, pretty much, I think, all the continents. He's passionate about digital acceleration, leadership development, and excellence creation in his various roles with the ICICI Group, SL Propack as Global CHRO, the Oberoi Group as EVP, Group HR, and OCLD, which is Oberoi Center for Learning and Development, EVP and Global CHRO at iGate, Group CVP Business Consulting and CHRO at Capgemini, Group CHRO for Vedanta Resources PLC, and Wellspun Group as Director and Group CHRO. He's also won an UN award for building world-class diversity and inclusion practices at Capgemini. And on the personal front, he's a fitness freak, as we all can see, loves cricket, motorcycles, traveling, and research, and is based out of Mumbai, India. Rajesh, an absolute honor to host you today. I'm really looking forward to a very, very enriching discussion with you today on a topic which I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear your experiences on, firsthand, which is career transition.
Sure, with you. And thanks for those glorious words. I'm pretty embarrassed, but
No.
that's pretty longish.
It's something to be proud of. Not many people have these kind of credentials in their profiles. So it's like if you've got it, flaunt it. So that's what I've done. Okay, Rajesh. Now 7 roles in 7 different industries. IT, banking, corporate strategy, finance, consulting, SAP, HR. So how did you get the opportunity to experience so many diverse verticals? What prompted you, to switch multiple number of times? And so my question is, was it by choice or was it destiny or was it both? So just if you could just take us through how each transition happened.
Right. A great question to start with. And first and foremost, I mean, none of us script our lives, you see, and neither did I. So if somebody comes across and tells me that, was this really planned? I mean, no way on earth. No one writes their journey, and it just happens to be. So there are a few factors that did happen at different stages, and then, you tend to take those decisions. But I'll start with the intrinsic nature of me, which could be pluses and minuses. So I'm a pretty restless guy. I mean, so I run out of steam on a few things when it's at peak. Want to do something more and beyond. That's one. Yeah. Second is I'm a risk taker. So being a biker, you never worry about falling from a bike and also that's inherently part of me. So I've taken those risks. The third thing is I've gone and bid for roles. I'm sure any professional or anybody having worked in multiple enterprises would have noticed that there are opportunities that come your way, but it's like, raising the hand and saying, well, not too many people are up there. There could be fear, there could be anxieties. I end up throwing my hand, and then many a times I wonder, did I do it a little too early? But nevertheless, that's me. So the basic personality is like I tend to take risks. I tend to go and bid for it. I tend to, get a little like done with on repetitive roles. So I keep doing more and more. And then over a period of time, it just happened to be without a script, I landed. Yes, to answer your second part of the question, I think ICICI was pretty much on for the first 15 years of my life, 15, 16 years of my life. And that actually took me through various roles. Fantastic organization. Never realized, so some transitions did happen within the first employer itself. After which I realized I wanted to globalize my skills. And there were not too many companies in the 90s, late 90s, which gave you an opportunity to really globalize. So when SL Packaging or SL ProPack came my way, the role had a lot of global content. Here was an Indian company which is global in nature, which had plants across, which is doing acquisitions. The acquisition of ProPack was done. So I thought, why not globalize my skills? So that was the turning point when I said, I'll take this role. So it kept me on the road for almost, 15 days in a month, and fascinating learning, I must say. The first learning of my life, and one of the roles that I'm extremely passionate about even today, because there was no precedence to what I was doing. I just learned on the job, made a humongous amount of mistakes, but that's where the learning came. Traveling
Right.
across, going to being in China, going to the US, doing joint venture in Germany, running multiple acquisition challenges, many startups, new startups in Russia. I mean, it is phenomenal. I think the time
Wow.
went by. Later, I
Yeah.
realized that I need to bring. So I was a line guy first and foremost. Being a line guy, when I bid for my role to be moving to an HR role, my MD and CEO did tell me, "Are you crazy? You're a customer-facing guy. Do you want to be going and running some back office function? Are you okay?" So he did give me time. He said that, "No, no, I'm not going to rush at this decision. You take your time." I did go back, reflect, and I did take 3 days, but I went back and reflected, and I told him with conviction that I would want to do it. I smelt an opportunity. So one thing that I would say is I'm a master's both in finance and HR. HR was untested for a very long time.
Yeah.
So I saw the convergence between the line and the HR function. And I also saw an opportunity. Not too many HR guys came from the line, one, and not too many HR guys understood finance or the business modeling part of it, which was a synergy. So that's where it happened. That was the second one. So I
Yeah.
stood very convinced and moved that. And then subsequently, opportunities did come. I moved to the Oberoi Group. I wanted to be very business centric. And also, that's one model where you see the entire HR function and the business being very close to each other. There's a lot of
Right.
overlap. And I
Right.
was majorly in IT, so I understood IT majorly. So technology has been something which has been the fulcrum of my entire profile. So came back to IT big time, ran global human resources for Patni iGate, ran this between India and the Americas, and then later moved into the Capgemini India board, ran that. So IT was major. That was another turning point of my life when I realized that I need to get into the topmost group management board, and that's when Vedanta happened because I
Okay.
I was definitely in the run at Capgemini, also doing exceedingly well. I was in the top team, as they call it, the group CEO's top team. I was getting all the opportunities that one could seek of. But something within me told me that, I need to further accelerate. So again, the risk-taking ability took the better of me, and I got into Vedanta again at a group exco level. And then at that point of time, there's one thing that's not in the CV. I tried a very small startup in 2016. So startup was always there. But I spoke to two private equities at that point of time, and they dragged their feet. And then there was a little bit of post-financial closure, the change of terms. And at that point of time, I was so vulnerable because I
Okay.
wasn't sure whether I should be part of the industry or move to startup
Yeah.
through one of the big consulting firms. I got convinced to moving into Welspun, and that's how it happened. Yeah, and when I met the promoter, got further convinced that I should be doing more of an industry role for some more time before getting into startups. So did that role, which is again more of the corporate center. So much beyond HR. I mean, ran the entire corporate center, did transformation, plenty of change agenda, plenty of cultural change as well. So post which got into the startup. Now my startup brings everything together. It's a triad of
Yes,
business, technology, and people. So this is what I've learned in the 3 decades bringing
absolutely.
together. So I've defined what took me, but maybe at that point of time I did not know this were the dimensions. Today, in hindsight, I'm able to reflect and give you this. But the inherent part of me possibly prevailed more than what the script
Right,
does tell you today.
right. I think that's very, very, I would say, very, rarely people get this kind of an exposure wherein you start with line and then you move into a backend function and you bring so much value to it because you've been a line person. And I think, and I think one point that you mentioned around, that risk taking ability, I think that is probably the most, I would say, the standing, the factor that stands out because not everybody has the appetite for risk. And not everybody has the appetite to sort of, try out new things. So I think that's something definitely, one can learn that, if you get a little sort of, bored, I would say, if what you're doing is not exciting you, then probably one should, explore a career transition. But a related question to that is, changing careers requires one to get out of their comfort zone. Once you're
Right.
in a career, you become really comfortable in it, and especially if you're doing well at it. You tend to settle in a comfort zone. So how can people, get themselves out of their comfort zones? A lot of times, people know that it's time to probably make a transition, but the fear of coming out of the comfort zone holds them back from making the move. So what's your advice for people who go through this dilemma?
So if you put a lot of people to test, I think most of them would say that I need a change, and they wait for the right change, and they're looking for something which is perfect. So I think a lot of myths will need to be destroyed.
Right.
First and foremost, any decision that one takes, right or wrong, is an outcome. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you need to make a choice. Yeah. First is
True.
you need to make a choice. Once you make a choice, whether to make it right or wrong is again a further reinforcement of how you really make it. So there
True.
are stuff like, you burn the bridges behind. You don't really look back on things. So my
Yeah.
philosophy is I never keep a plan B. I never keep a
Okay.
plan B.
That's
Because
interesting.
so the moment you keep a plan B with respect to your personal stuff, then you tend to look behind. Okay,
Yeah.
and for example, you start going that extra mile, you start putting yourself, and then later realize, oh, maybe this is not working. Can I look behind? Can I go back? I think that tendency is something that has got to be burnt once you made your choice, and it's very
Sure.
individualistic. Yeah.
Sure.
So people who are willing to do this can do this, and there's no right or wrong. I mean, you need not do it.
Yeah.
People who are
Yeah.
extremely happy will say, "Why jerk? Doing all this? There's no need. I'm extremely well settled." But the biggest fear that comes in is, why should I start something afresh? I'm already a proven, expert here. Number
Absolutely.
one.
Yeah.
Number two is, what if I fail? I've already got so much of success here.
True.
What if I fail? So the fear of failure has got to be dealt with. And the
Absolutely.
third is, yeah, and the third is, do you have the energy and to go through and learn something new? The agility needs to really take in. I think this is some of the elements that comes into play when you start taking a decision.
Sure.
Would I have fear, anxiety, stress going with all of this? 100% yes. I think
Hmm.
it's a process. But you need to give yourself that time, and you
Right.
don't outsource that choice to someone. Yeah. So you can't go and ask someone and say, is this right? I'm doing this. Nobody can advise anyone for that matter with respect to
Right.
any career decision or a life decision. You need to go through it. You can take words of advice, you can take some experiences that the person has, and this is
Yeah.
exactly what I would do. I mean, I'm nobody to advise anyone for that matter, but I can give some experiences that I've had, which actually would bring some kind of a knowledge or an enrichment to decisions that he or she would want to take. I think that's been the philosophy, and that's worked so far very well.
Sure. I think you brought out a very good point. The fear of failure. I think that
Right.
is something that a lot of people grapple with when they decide to, when they even think of a career transition. What if I fail? So, how does one overcome that fear? Because it is definitely going to be there. What if I fail? So, how does one handle that fear?
So one would need to talk to a lot of people. I think that's the
Hmm.
first thing. You need to open out. Yeah.
Right.
Because when you're actually exposing yourself to a new journey, you need a lot of advice. You need a
True.
lot of wisdom to be shared. You need a lot of experience to be shared. So the more and more you open out, the better and better you get. So one of the
Right.
reasons of why you have failure is because of inadequate information as well. When you consciously make a choice, for example, I can't be a doctor tomorrow. I know that I have zero skills of being there. But can
True.
I be a good sales guy? Maybe I would have 20% skills. Maybe I would have 30% skills. Could I be, can I be can I do something in data science today? Maybe I'll not be as conversant with the new gen, but I know I can do my bit there. So
Right.
you need to put yourself in terms of how you can be. I call it,
Sure.
ambition is one part. Your agility is the second part,
True.
and also the willingness to go through this entire stuff is the third part. So failure has got to be dealt with. You share your burden
Yeah.
in terms of what you're going through, get more knowledge, get more depth in terms of understanding what it's all about. Make a very
Right.
conscious choice, yeah, whether you
Yeah.
want to really go through. Yeah. But I will again and again keep coming back. Every time you have a very strong plan B or a very strong security that you built for yourself, no harm. I mean, let this be, I'll just try it out. That mindset doesn't work.
Yeah.
Instead, you need to go with the mindset that I'm going to make it happen. I will give it my
Wow.
full shot. I
Yeah.
may burn, it may happen that, uh, I may need help at the right point of time. So think about that. If I need help, whom do I go to? Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I keep going through, so coach is a good idea, absolutely a good idea. So you need somebody to be navigating and helping you.
Sure.
Look at you and me. Somebody did bet on us, right? And
Yes.
I'm grateful to a lot of people who bet on me, I mean, at
Yes.
different stages. And where did this
Absolutely.
bet come from? I mean, they actually bet on their intuition.
Yeah.
So why are we lagging behind to back our own intuition? The fear of
Absolutely.
failure is just that, it comes from an inherent, deep down iceberg model where, it comes from your values, from your belief system, the way
True.
you've grown. So if you actually try to work through that, I think it's possible to overcome. And the only way to do it is an inside out. You really open yourself out, and then there are a
True.
lot of people who are willing to work with you and help you through this particular journey. The more and more you keep it inside, I think then the trouble starts. So
Yes.
I think that's
Absolutely.
that's one thing that possibly can work.
Sure. And it's a very interesting insight to hear that do not have a plan B, because normally what we are told is always have a plan B. But this is a very interesting and a very different perspective. And I understand where it is coming from. Because if you have a plan B, you would always tend to, play safe. Okay, I do have something to fall back on. So you won't probably give your 100% to what you're doing. But if you have that, if you have a belief that, okay, this is something, failure is not an option. I have to do
Right,
well in this. You probably will end up being at least 50% successful, if not 100%. I really
right,
appreciate that point, and I think that way of thinking is very, very different, and something that I think a lot of us need to do. Also, I think a lot of social pressure comes in because we're in a position where we are doing really well. People know us, and suddenly we move into an unknown territory, something that we've not really navigated before. So what will the people think of me? I was so successful, and now, what if I fail? So I think handling that social pressure and being open to accepting a little bit of a change in the social image probably also would help. That's been my experience too.
but that's an
uh,
interesting one. That's the biggest disease, as we call it. Log kya kahenge? I think,
exactly.
so the moment you deal with that, then you're
Yeah.
leading your life. And remember, I
Absolutely.
mean, stress or anxiety is always when you lead someone else's life. If
Yes.
you're leading life by your choice, it's never a stress because it
Beautiful.
is someone else's stress actually that's put on you. And same is the
Absolutely.
case with career as well. If there's
Yeah.
someone else who's controlling it at all points of time,
Yeah.
you actually tend to get stressed, and stress comes from that fact. The moment
True.
you decide and exercise your choice and you're clear about it, I think life becomes good. And the
Much
point that I
easier.
also wanted to say was, Shivani, one does change 90 degrees. I've changed 90 degrees. I've not gone back. So you keep
Yeah.
on doing this 90 degrees till the time, the entire stuff
Yeah.
gets complete. So there are opportunities that will come. It's a
Yeah.
choice that you make. Yeah. And I'm not saying
Beautiful
one shouldn't
thoughts.
go back. You can go back to,
Yes.
to something with a reinforced intent as well. There's nothing
Right.
wrong, but you need to start believing more. That's it.
Absolutely. I think those are very, very beautiful thoughts that you've shared. I think the ability to change is tremendous when one wants to switch a career. The ability to unlearn and relearn, like we say. Otherwise, you just become stagnant in what you do.
So Shivani, that tells me, why am I at the receiving end? You've done. When I look at your profile, you've done so many different things. So I'm not very unique in that space. So maybe worthwhile for me to also listen to a couple of things that drove you actually at those stages when you took those
Yeah.
decisions. You're also pretty self-believed, high on self-belief, and then you've navigated your career well as well. So what drove you? Maybe two
Yeah.
tenets for me to pick up also in this conversation.
No, very kind of you to ask that, Rajesh. See, for me, I think we share a lot in common. I need constant action. I'm someone who really believes in having a lot of diversity in what I do. And I had a very nice career, super career in HR when I was working in different corporates. But somewhere I felt that I wanted to test myself and see if I have the capability to build something on my own. Start
Right.
something from scratch, nurture it and watch it grow. And like you, honestly, I never had a plan B, and I still don't have a plan B. I don't know today if my business shuts, what am I going to do? I have no idea. And I don't want to think about that also, because if I know at the back of my mind there is a plan B, I will probably then be a little lax. So I
Right.
honestly, I don't have a plan B. And I think it's the risk appetite again that drove me. I wanted to take that risk. I wanted to test myself out and see whether I have the capability. I've proven myself in one field, but do I have the capability to sort of run the entire business? So make that transition. From an HR to a business transition is a difficult one, and it really pulled me out of my comfort zone. Really, really.
Right.
I had to really get into the nitty gritties of financials, strategy, but I love doing it, and in the
Right.
process, learned a lot. So that's what sort of drove me to open this, to
Awesome.
tread on an
Awesome.
entrepreneurial path.
Awesome. You speak
Okay,
with so much of passion. Yeah. Awesome.
thank you. Great. I think we have questions also coming in, which is great. I would encourage our audience to share more questions. So one question is from Shweta. Shweta says that in my career, I have also seen um, a lot of people find their uh, a lot of people find their passion in another line of work after they have gained a significant amount of experience and achievements in the other. So how easy is it for one to make that big move in that case? How easy or difficult, probably?
It's very individualistic, but I think the question is great because one
Yeah.
thing, because the topic is all about career transitions. The future is all about building yourself on experience stack rather than career tracks. I think there's a huge difference.
Right.
Uh, in the 90s and the early 2000, we used to have something very well structured and defined as career tracks, which is very verticalized. So one would know I started the management trainee and I know that, I'm going up a
Right.
business track or I'm going up the functional track or whatever. But you exactly knew that, how one is getting navigated at what points of time, what needs to be done, how am I performing, what are the potential stuff that needs to be done. So it's a very vertical track. Career
Right.
transitioning is all about building yourself an experience. And there are three elements that I say, one needs to really check and go a little deep. I've gone a little deep on this. May not be exhaustive, but it covers almost 90% of the stuff. There are only three drivers that actually drives you to do anything else. Yeah.
Sure.
The first one is learning.
Hmm.
And so there are a lot of people who are actually, they want to learn something new, they want to add a skill, they want to be driven by a new line of activity. So learning drives you because you
Right.
really want to get there. Second is growth. Now, growth means different things for different people at different stages in life as well. So
True.
one is possibly at the formative years, you actually want more money because you have those aspirations of putting a lot of things in place. So we know the
True.
classical Maslow and all. So at
Yeah.
different stages, and growth, you need to define what are your growth dimensions. So
Yeah.
is it a career track? Is it a title? Is it more compensation? Is it like really wealth creation? Is it like giving back? So there could be actualization phases. So there are different stages at which you want to do different things. Yeah. So define
Sure.
that growth for you. That's the second
Right.
element. And the third one is experience. Yeah,
Hmm.
people care very little about, what it's all about. But the experience that we have, we fondly carry. So if there's a good conversation, if there's something that has happened, whenever you speak of a role, whenever you speak about the past, what do we really fall back on? We
Hmm.
recall those one or two or three instances or experiences and really derive a lot of energy, pleasure, and joy and nostalgia talking about
Right.
it.
Right.
So you actually need to build those experiences. So, for
Sure.
example, if there are, you're passionate about a particular area, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah.
So and at many a time, you're driven monetarily. So you succumb yourself to certain choices that you made because okay, I've got a mortgage, I've got a few things to do. So go through that because that's a choice you've done.
Yeah.
Liberation is in the mind. It is not
True.
in things that you hold around you. And log kya kahenge is the last one. I mean, it's a nail in the coffin. I mean, it's
Yes.
absolutely the last nail. I mean, once you succumb to that, after that, I think one
Yes.
really just falls in line on a
Yeah.
track that someone else has written for you and which is not how
Absolutely.
you want to be. So the
Absolutely.
calling will come at different stages. Make a debate, get the necessary wisdom, talk to people, take umpteen feedback, reflect, but at the end of the day, back yourself to do what you do and own
Yeah.
that decision because
Yeah.
no one else can make a decision for anyone. You need to make the
Absolutely.
decision for yourself.
Very
So I
well
think
said.
that experience versus career is the divide as
Yeah.
far as this particular question of Shweta is concerned.
Very well said. In fact, this statement on "log kya kahenge," there is a there's a quote that I came across that the fear of "log kya kahenge" has actually killed many initiatives than actually failure has. So the fear
Right.
of actually taking the plunge has already killed. I mean, you already कि लोग क्या कहेंगे यार नहीं करती मैं. And tomorrow, I don't know, I might succeed in it. So this has actually, killed many initiatives than actually failure has. So I completely take your point that, and very important, point that you make, that back your own decision, own up the decision. It was your decision. It went well. Take the credit for it. If it didn't go well, a lot of people get into a blame game after that. It didn't go well
Right.
because this happened or because that happened. But I think it's important to just own it up and say, nahi hua, and there's always, another way to do it. So great. I hope that answers Shweta's question very well. Now one question that most of the people are asking is that how does one equip for a career transition? What's the groundwork that one needs to do before taking the plunge into an alternate career? And more importantly, what are some of the questions that one needs to ask themselves before deciding on a career transition?
Right, right. It's a great question. I think first and foremost, there's a lot of calling that you need to hear. There's an internal calling that you really need to hear. And the body does give you that, the mind does give you that. I need
Yeah,
to do this, I need to do this. You keep on getting up with this. So hear your calling. That's the first one. Second is make a very realistic assumption or realistic assumptions of what does it take for us or for
yeah,
the person to really go through the transition. Yeah. So make a very realistic and don't your ambition alone is not enough.
yeah,
Supposing I say I want to be doing this, yeah, that's one part of it. That's just the aspiration part of it. Do I
true,
have the skills? Yeah. And we may
absolutely,
not have all the skills. Yeah. Let's face it, no one has
yeah,
all the skills. And if
yeah,
I were to talk on futuristic skills that one would need to, I can possibly talk for the next 2 hours how unprepared we all are. So
right,
that's something. But that's reality. Let's take that.
sure,
are you willing to go through that particular journey? Yeah, with respect to skills. So when you actually, I encourage a lot of people to do SWOT, whether I'm coaching or mentoring. I actually say, okay, your target is there. Now make a SWOT from your current destination
Hmm.
to where you want to get your future destination. What are the skills that one would need to really get to? Yeah, and
Right.
what's then the next question is, how do you plan to do it? How
Yeah.
do you plan to do it? You may not have all the answers, but the moment you start writing, yeah, you hear your
Yes.
calling, you start getting into the skills of the next role or career that you want to, then start preparing for it. And then further add on to people who are already there in that
True.
role or in that function or in that environment. Get an additional feed about, success, failure, future, whatever. The more and more you gain about it, now you're a little bit of an informed person as far as decision making is concerned. Now, once
Right.
you have done that, you need to internally process it. Now,
Yes.
decisions are getting conflicted between the heart and the mind. So when the
True.
passion tells you, a lot of things comes from the heart. I want to do this. The bucket list is all about heart. Yeah, you
Yeah.
want to do this. You want to do that. Those are all passions. Those are all ambitions, unfulfilled desires. All sitting in the heart. But your
Yeah.
mind keeps taking you to different level because the mind plays games every day. Every day, your
True.
mind is playing game, and that's
True.
navigating you. So once you're able to take control of your mind, and the
Hmm.
mind does not control you, you're in
Yeah.
a better state to deal with all of this. Yeah. And you
True.
need to keep reminding yourself. I mean,
Yeah.
right from the day you get up in the morning, the mind is going to tell you. If you set yourself an alarm to get up at 5 in the morning, the mind is going to start by telling you, Arey, you've had an awful day yesterday, or the day is going to be so busy. Why are you pushing yourself so hard? Or your
Yeah.
body is aching, why are you doing this? Come on, you can get 10 more minutes of sleep. So again,
Yeah.
who's telling you all this? The mind. Now you need to
Yeah.
kick yourself and get to that stage where you need to tell yourself, no, I mean, mind is not going to give me instructions. I'm going to give instructions to the mind. Those are the
True.
changes that you need to build and do the crossover. Once you do this, then it's an informed choice. Then
Hmm.
you possibly are better equipped to deal with, if
Yeah.
at all there's a failure or a course correction or whatever you say, then
Sure.
you actually start making it as a conscious choice in a way of life. Yeah.
Right.
Then it starts getting better.
Sure. I guess the whole piece about controlling your mind. I think that really comes handy, and I think also one you may have a passion about anything and you may want to do it, but one important thing, one caution is that you need to. A great idea is the SWOT analysis that you give. That you need to do a detailed SWOT analysis. Do I have the skills to actually take the plunge? Or am I just doing it because my heart? I think there somewhere has to be a balance between the head and the heart.
Right.
Your heart may say a lot of things, but your head has to also sort of validate it. And that's what we call an intelligent decision or a calculated risk that you take.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
I would say the SWOT analysis is something definitely anybody who's wanting to do a career transition should definitely do for themselves and see whether they have the potential to do well in the role that they are thinking. So I think great insights there. We have a question from Kokila. She's saying that is it wise to take a risk and change the job track after having a significant experience in some other field, and what are the possibilities? Is it wise?
So I'll answer the second part first. The possibilities are always low.
Hmm.
The possibilities are low because not because of you, but because of the people who hire you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not too many people actually back you to come from a completely unknown field. So that's the reason I said, there are people who back you, and
Right.
always back people who back you, give them your 100%
Right.
because they have taken the bet. And similarly, it's for us to take the bet on the others. So,
True.
so the second part is always look out for those opportunities if you really have it in you, and
Yeah.
always will need to make a bid for it. Yeah. How many times have we gone across and
Yeah.
challenged someone to say, I can do this, which is not in our comfort zone? I mean, touch
Yes.
our hearts and say, I mean, we always like will hold back. No, not my domain. Why should I get into it unnecessarily? Even in meetings, you will not
Yeah.
stick your neck out and say that, I can possibly take a shot at this. There'll always be opportunities. And there
Yes.
are those, like, you'll always see there are few guys who actually say, let me try this, let me give it a shot. That is what differentiates
Yeah.
a disruptor or a differentiator between, a regular guy and a differentiator. One needs to
Absolutely.
do that. So that's important. Yeah. So I'm answering the second part of the question. So the first
Yeah.
part doesn't have any scripted kind of a response. Now, if you're comfortable doing what you do,
Yeah.
and there is a burning desire and there's a fire in the belly and then there's an unfulfilled desire to do something else, that's
Yeah.
become passion, and that passion has become obsession, and you really need to do it. Crossover.
Absolutely.
But you need to be mindful that that crossover is a trade-off, and
Yeah.
that crossover takes you to some time at the base of the next level. You again need
Yeah.
to come up the learning agility. Yeah. So you will
Yes.
be put yourself in a place where others know more than you, but that should not really drive you or set yourself, set you low. I think
Right.
once you're able to overcome that, then the learning agility part of it actually takes the fear and you actually move to the next level. So adaptability and agility when you cross over is important. You need to adapt and
Yeah.
leave aside all your mindsets and baggage when you cross over,
True.
and then start moving with high amount of agility to really overtake. How many
Yes.
times have you seen your school buddies who have been left behind, or your college buddies who have been left behind in NACADS really progress faster than us?
Yeah.
That tells
Lots
the
of times.
story. That tells the story. So it's
Yeah.
not that you need to follow conventions. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be the unconventional if you want to. Again, as I said, it's a choice.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable and the calling is not there, there's no burning desire to really look for something, and you're
Yeah.
pretty contented with what you do. There are many people who are very, very contented and
Yes.
want to keep doing the same stuff all over again and again.
Yeah.
Then be
There's
happy doing
nothing
what
wrong
you're
in that.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong in that as well. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I think well said. There's nothing wrong in that. So don't assume that people who are like lifers or people who have done only one vertical roles, start to end. Nothing wrong. It's a
Yeah.
choice that they have taken. Certain
Absolutely.
choices. Yeah. Now the only environment for the next Gen Y, Gen Z, and Gen Z plus, or whatever we call it, are like now the environment really gives you multiple exposures to either skill yourself and also opportunities. Possibly
Yeah.
we did not have the basket of opportunities, but today
Yes.
I think life gives you that, and they live for. And again, I'm quoting what I picked up in our earlier conversation, that work is to work is to come after life. Yeah, we
Yes.
God created us to live. We started working by choice, and we made that conscious choice. Now technology has got so much of this doing for us that we
Yeah.
really need to live. Yeah, and this pandemic has
Yes.
also taught us that. Now we are
Yes.
in a state of suspended animation. Just wonder, has anybody told us to be working Monday to Friday, 8 hours into 5 days a week, 40 hours or so many hours, that you need to do this? We just regimented in our mindset
Yeah.
that we've got to work and so many days of leave. All those myths have been destroyed in whatever we're seeing now. So again, the
True.
same disruption in what we do to our career as well. So I think
Yeah.
that's the acceleration possibility.
Sure. And I think the point that you made around, being ready, having a mindset, then when you make the crossover, you may be here when you made that crossover, but then, when you go, when you make the crossover, you should be ready to start right from scratch.
Right.
In fact, that's a conversation that I was having with one of my mentees, and she wanted to enroll for one of our courses. And she said, but I want, I was working as a software engineer and I want that I should get the same package when I switch over to HR. I said, well, that's not possible because, you're going to start as a fresher. So I think that mindset, if you want to make a career transition, you have to have the mindset of starting as a fresher. And maybe, rising very fast is in your hands, but definitely having that mindset that, okay, I'm no longer what I was. I need to start from scratch. I think that's what's very important for anyone to take a decision. And one related question to what Kokila asked is that sometimes people want to make that transition, but their family or their friends or their colleagues don't support it. They would start putting doubts in the person's mind about his or her decision. So and that's something that I personally experienced as well some time back. So what do you think should a person do if there is opposition or resistance to their decision? Do you experience this? Did you experience this? And how did
Yes.
you overcome this?
Yes, I think 100% to answer your question objectively, yes. I think there will always be resistance. There'll always be reservation. There'll be
Yeah.
a sense of doubt. Are you doing the right thing, etc., etc. But I think you need to back yourself at the end of the day. I think
Yeah.
that's where you need to draw that inner strength. I'm going ahead
Yeah.
with this. Yeah. So there's no answer to how you deal with family, because people who are extremely dear to you will have something to say about it, right? And you're not going to be very isolated to say, I'm doing this decision, it's entirely mine. Others have got nothing to do. It doesn't work. And we
Yeah.
are like, culturally, our society is so like,
Yes.
in the thick of it. We want the whole clan to be involved in what we do, and that's how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong in that. But when you keep the entire family ecosystem, keep it for discussion, keep it for inputs, keep it for knowledge, keep it for socialization, as we call it. But
Hmm.
don't let someone else decide for you. Now the question can never be, Shivani, what do you advise I do? That's never a valid question when it comes to a career. That's never a valid question. So you can always reverse it to say, what do you think you should be doing?
Yeah.
So owning a decision is only true when you actually do it from within. So I
True.
can go to anyone, and the family is perfect for advice. No two ways about it. I mean,
True.
absolutely, the family is the right place where you go and seek advice. And there are a lot of people who have more wisdom. So when somebody is making a choice, you're making a learned choice. You're making a very, very informed choice, but you may
Yeah.
not have the necessary wisdom. Seek wisdom,
Right.
but
Right.
don't seek an answer. Don't seek
True.
an answer from anyone. Don't ask anyone, what should I be doing? That's a very lame question.
True.
That's not something that will come. Because the moment you ask that question, you outsource your decision
Right.
making.
Absolutely.
And that never works. Because you will
Absolutely.
never own that decision. But
Yeah.
yes, I think you need to put yourself through, and this works well. Because when you take your entire family into whatever, and then own the decision, you will never have the misery of or the anguish of having gone through it, because you take a conscious choice. And not that every time it goes right. It could
Right.
go wrong, it could go sideways, but then you've done it by choice. So again, I
True.
come back to the entire narrative, and in one line to say, you make your choice, get the entire family ecosystem to advise you, give you pearls of wisdom, to give whatever they can see from their lens, but none
Right.
of them will contribute to decision making, which is entirely yours.
Absolutely.
I think that's the
Very well said.
difference.
Very well explained. I think that's something that I'm sure everybody faces that sort of a situation in their lives. But the way you've suggested that don't let anybody own your decisions. You can have advisors, and you can validate, you can bounce
Right.
off ideas from people. But the moment I think what you said is very right. The moment you leave the decision to them, then you're not owning it up, and in
So
the process you probably won't give your 100% also, because somebody else has told you that ye chalega kar lo, then you're
yeah.
feeling कि उसने बोला है चलेगा तो चलेगा, whether I do something about it or not.
How many times have you heard in our cultural system where the parents will say, I've told my son or daughter to do this. Yeah,
Oh
one.
yes.
Number two, the child getting up and saying, I did this because my parents wanted me to do this.
Yes.
That's where I think the dichotomy of and the trade-off happens, because you're not owning your
Yes.
career, owning your decision. But at that point
Absolutely.
of time, if the parents actually, many a times, their unfulfilled desire gets passed on.
True. Very true.
I'm not a chartered accountant, so I want my daughter to be a chartered accountant. I'm not an engineer, so I want my son to be an engineer. I mean, that's like,
True.
that's the worst you could do. Don't
Yeah.
pass on your unfulfilled state to your children. I think that's
Absolutely.
so, and never make the statement that, I will tell you what to do, or I will, I know
True.
what, maine duniya dekha hai. It doesn't add any value. But give them the right words, give them the right encouragement, and backing them when somebody, when a decision goes wrong, or when somebody
Yeah.
wants to make a side change, or I think that's crucial. That's damn crucial.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where family can play a role, not
Absolutely.
when they want to make a choice.
Absolutely, absolutely right. I think, but one, a question that comes to my mind as you say that, we're dealing with Gen Z today. And in my experience, I have seen, a lot of my mentees are the Gen Z generation. A lot of times they are, not very clear on the kind of career choices that they should make, or they end up frequently changing their career options. So, what is your advice for Gen Z?
I would say I think they're completely evolved. Yeah, first and foremost, career is not something which you need to really back. Why are we backing careers? I did tell you. I mean, I'll come back to the same point. Back yourself with experiences.
Hmm.
You want to take a sabbatical now, go for it. You have an unfulfilled desire, do it. Yeah. So we were very verticalized. Remember, I think bulk of us actually started off by saying, okay, you need to do something which is for survival. If you cross that stage, you need to prove a point. When you prove a point, you
Uh, Rajesh, you're not audible. Uh, no, I can't hear you. Rajesh, am I audible to you? Can you hear me? Can my audience hear me? Am I audible? I think Rajesh, you're not audible. Probably you need to re-log in. Yeah, okay. So till the time Rajesh is not back, I will just answer one question based on my own experience. Yeah, there's a question here that how does one become how does one do a graceful career transition? And I think that's a question that Neha has asked. How does one make a graceful career transition? I think all the points that Rajesh said are very, very valid. That before you make a career transition, definitely do a SWOT. Do what you think whether one is passion, but also not all the times. And this has been something that I've seen a lot of people going through. Not all the time your passion will result in something that you will be successful in, because one is passion, the other is whether you have the skills to pursue that passion. And if you don't have the skills, how open are you to building those skills so that you do well in your passion? So first and foremost, be prepared to upskill yourself and give that fire to your passion in the form of skilling yourself. That would be my advice to you. And secondly, of course, you have to see the readiness part. Okay, Rajesh is back. I'm going to bring him on screen. Rajesh, am I audible?
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
Sorry.
no problem. No worries. So I was just answering this question that Neha had said, how to make a graceful career transition. And my advice was that, one should see definitely one is passion, whether I have passion for something, but secondly, do I also have the skills? And if I don't have the skills, what do I need to do to build those skills so that I excel in my, in my
Right.
new chosen career?
Right.
But there's one more thing, Rajesh, and I want to ask this to you, and it's related to Neha's question. How do you think how important it is to be financially secure before you actually make a career transition?
Absolutely. There's nothing called as financial security. Ask the richest entrepreneur and he'll tell you he's financially insecure. Ask the most successful CEO and he will tell you he's financially insecure. I can do better. So there's nothing like being financially secured here. So
Interesting.
it's a complete myth. It's a complete myth. You will never be financially secure.
Hmm.
Any person, there used to be surveys where we used to ask people, are you satisfied with your compensation that you're drawing for the role that you're doing? 99% of the people will say, show me one person who's going to tell you that, I'm paid well. So I
Yes.
think that financial security is in the mind. You got to deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's never enough. I think that's the
Hmm.
second one. It's never enough. So got to deal with it. Yeah, got to deal with it. That fear actually holds us back. And that is
Yeah.
why we never complete our scripted, we go through the scripted journey. And one reason,
Yes.
I will do this after so and so. I will do this post retirement. I will do this when I'm 45
Yeah.
plus. I'll do this, I'll make my. You don't make plans. Nobody is, gone as per a scripted life. It has never happened. If somebody tells you I did move my life exactly the way I had planned, he or she is bullshitting. It never happens. Yeah, it never
Yes.
happens. And do you think we have
Yes.
written a script for ourselves? It's every day you take challenges, you take those decisions, you move on. Some are
Yeah.
good, some are bad, but you own it and then move further. Yeah. And you get up
True.
with a renewed vigor and then deal with the next stage and move on. So financial security, there's no answer at all. How much is enough? It's in your head.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's because that is one of the key barrier that a lot of people have when they want to pursue something else. Okay, right now I'm financially earning this much. I'm, in my mind, I'm secure. But what if, I have to start with day zero, as in where I may presume that I will have no revenue at all. So my take on this is that you should be a little planned in that sense that, it's good to have, it's good to follow your passion, but घर चलाने के लिए पैसे चाहिए होते हैं. So obviously you
Right.
need to take that plunge once you feel that you can manage if this chunk of money doesn't come in. But I think, like you said, it's all in the head. I may be earning lakhs and I may feel that that is something that would make me secure, but I the next day I may feel, no, this is not enough. So I think
Right.
what you pointed out
No, I
is
also
really
want to
helpful.
point out the question that you asked. The answer was in the question itself. You asked somebody wanted to make a change and said that, I'm not
Yeah.
going to take a lesser compensation. So the person has
Yeah.
already made the choice. Yeah. So
Yes.
money
Yes.
is driving more than the career. So you've already
Absolutely.
made the choice. And you need to
Absolutely.
back yourself to say that at this stage in life, what I make is important for me. I'm not able
True.
to make the next one. But
True.
what does it take for me to do the next one? So
Yeah.
what you secure yourself to do that. For example, somebody says, you've often heard this. I will make this change because I've got a stable income so far as my spouse is concerned. Yeah. So I don't
Yes.
really need to worry, So the provisions are taken care, the mortgage is taken care. So let me do this. So these are all like, made philosophies, right or wrong. But it
Right.
really is very individual. Yeah. It's your
Sure.
appetite, it's your
Sure.
ability, and it's your backing of what is adequate and what is inadequate. So there are
True.
people who
True.
who actually sell everything to do something that they think is passion.
Absolutely.
There are guys who
Yes.
have everything but yet they are insecure. So you have all the
Absolutely.
extremes. Yeah. So you need to
It's very
define for yourself.
individualistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very individualistic. I
Right.
tend to agree with you. Now, still now I've asked questions around how does one make a career transition and all of that. Now I'm going to, turn the table around and ask you a question that, a lot of times people get stereotyped. For example, somebody's working in the banking sector or the IT sector or any other sector. After a certain duration in their careers, they find it extremely difficult to find good opportunities in other sectors. And that's not because of them, that's because hiring managers prefer to hire from the same sector. So, what is your advice for hiring managers when they come across a person who does not have prior experience in the sector or the field? What criteria should they be evaluating the prospective candidates' suitability on?
Right. Right. Fantastic question. I think this is actually the cause of a lot of trouble,
True.
because hiring managers go as per job description, and job description
Yes.
tells you, I want so and so work X, these are the qualifications, and get me somebody who is a perfect role fit.
Yeah.
I think disruption needs to happen there. And the disruption is not in the hiring manager or not in the person who is, acquiring that particular talent. The disruption is in the culture.
Absolutely.
Only when you actually amend the culture or alter the culture of the organization, where there's a little bit of a risk taking and the ability to get 20% out of box profiles, as I call it,
Right.
you will not be taking that chance. Just increase as a hiring manager, just get yourself to a mindset where I say, I'll see, role fit guys perfectly fine, but I will also be open to looking at people who are moving from the other stuff. And the
Hmm.
biggest bet is because there's so much of a reservation, because most of the hiring managers, and if they come from the line, are actually,
Yeah.
living quarter on quarter to deliver the business performance. They have no thinking bandwidth. They're just so target driven. They just want people who can deliver on the role, and then they make the decision, good or bad. I mean, there's no runtime. Yeah, so
Right.
you don't have time to skill them, train them, develop them. All these are good philosophies to stock in HR, but line guys
Yeah.
do not have the time and luxury because they're running so hard, and the tendency to
Yes.
keep following this. So the pushback is going to come. Where are you pushing me to do this? So the sponsor, so the
Yeah.
CEO and the management team will have to set
Yeah.
in the
The
culture
leadership. Yeah.
where you actually alter the entire thinking. And there are a few levers that have worked out of my experience. Number
Hmm.
one, when you actually run a little bit of a central corporate center kind of a diktat to say, you need to take 20% freshers and you
Hmm.
need to internally move people. Create an
Yeah.
internal job exchange for the hiring managers and see that
Right.
opportunities are created from within. So internal job posting is a very powerful option. Very
I agree.
powerful option. Because
Hmm.
there will always be somebody who's aspiring to get there, somebody who's
Yes.
willing to take that risk, and you cannot have a better playing ground than an internal job posting or your company backing or your
Absolutely.
management team really enabling you. They know you well. They know you well.
Absolutely.
They also know the fact that you have the appetite to do it, but you do not possibly have the skill. So that
True.
is when you actually do it. So this kind of stuff really encourages people to actually go through that mile and make it
Right.
successful. So hiring
Right.
managers step is dare to be innovative, challenge the hiring managers,
Hmm.
get them to at least force by choice by the sponsor, and
Hmm.
give them profiles and back it internally through IJPs and give
True.
them the relevant choice, even if they're like 15-20% low fit. So an external
Right.
candidate being, 70% fit and an internal person being 50% fit, the choice
Right.
is in your hands. Take the person with the
Right.
50% choice. The stickiness is higher, the loyalty is higher, and the results could be higher. You need to just bridge that 20%. But look at the kind of engagement you would have done, and look at the kind of model you would have built. Yeah, so there's so much
Absolutely.
of camaraderie, so much of engagement that you drive to the next level. So that's my
True.
advice.
And you may even find people internally who are very talented to take up that role, didn't have the opportunity, and this IGP, I think, works wonder if it is done in the right way, and I think one is IGP, the other is the organization. Like you said, you should also have the readiness to accept that not every job would have 100% skilled or qualified people who can do that job.
Right,
So in that sense, it puts the onus on the organization also to own up the development of people, wherein you invest in the people, give them the right skills, you see the spark in them, it's just about
right.
upskilling them. And I
Beautiful.
think that's where a lot of organizations are doing work and getting internal talent, which is so powerful. The most powerful source of talent is your internal talent. So I completely endorse your view there.
Beautifully
Wonderful.
articulated, Shivani, and HR has got a role to play here. Invariably, the
Absolutely.
guys who are actually wanting to make a move are never
Yeah.
backed by their current managers to say, no,
Yes.
no, no, why are you making this move? No way I'm going to release you.
Yes.
HR has got a
Yes.
massive role to play there. You've got
Absolutely.
to make it happen. You've got to make
Yes.
it happen. That is where I'm saying, you need to move it to the next level and make it happen. You
Absolutely.
back somebody who wants to make it rather than getting somebody which is unknown. So
Yeah.
that's how it works. But you've articulated it better than what I have
Thank
said.
you.
So
No, it's just based on experience. I've seen this, IGP taking off, but then it doesn't really take off because somewhere
right,
I've seen HR not being too convinced about it themselves. So I think the backing also needs to come from the leadership. It has to be a part of the DNA of the
right,
organization, a part of the culture,
right,
that we give opportunity first to our people, and then we look outside.
right.
We're running out of time. I will ask one last question to you, Rajesh, and that's a slightly personal question. If you were given an option to go back in time and rectify a career decision or a choice that you wished you had never opted for, what would that be and why? And most importantly, what did that experience make you learn as an individual and as a professional?
Great question. I was actually offered a CEO role by a real luminary in this country, and which was like a small business, 2,000 crore asset size. And he told me that, I believe in you. And I think, you forget whatever you've been scattered profile and that you're trying to gather. Come to this, run this business. I know I can back you to do this. And he actually locked me in the boardroom. When I say locked me, I mean, he kept me in the boardroom till the time I came to a decision. And at that stage, I must be honest, I think the role was pretty good. And there's no way on earth I would have missed that role. I traded off for compensation because I would have had to settle for about 30% lesser to bite that role. In hindsight, I think that was a mistake. I should have taken that because the calling was there. I traded off for money, and it was somebody who really backed me. And the learning that came out to your last part is there are people who know you better than you yourself know yourself. So I think so. Somebody knew me better than I knew myself at that point of time, and that's where you realize in hindsight I did not have the wisdom. I was extremely learned then, but I don't think I was wise enough to have made that decision myself. So I lacked that. But in hindsight, I don't like to use the word regret, but that's a missed opportunity. But anyway, that's life. That's life.
That's life, absolutely. And I'm sure a lot of us have had these kind of decisions in life which we not regret, but we wished we would have taken them. And
Right.
but I personally believe that every such incident leaves a lot of learning with you. And like you said, your biggest learning was that there are people who know you better than what you are, and sometimes it's good to take that advice and not
Right.
lose out on, and especially people who mean well.
Right.
I would definitely agree and endorse that point that these are all learnings, but yes, definitely make us a little more wiser in our career journey. And we tend to make better choices, informed choices at a later date. Super. Rajesh, I think we can just go on. There are so many questions that are in my mind, and I'm sure there are in our audience also. It has been a fantastic session. There's been a lot of engagement, a lot of comments coming our way, fantastic takeaways, fantastic session, interactive session. Super. I think we'll have to probably, do another one to handle all the queries and questions, and we'll definitely do that in the future. But it's been an absolute pleasure to host you, Rajesh. Tremendous takeaways from today's session, and I'm sure our audience agrees with it. I've personally enjoyed really having this conversation with you, and I look forward to more such conversations. Thank you so much for taking out your time and coming on this platform today.
Thank you so much, Shivani. Absolutely a delight to be on this platform with you, and I hope I lived up to your expectations. I try to
You
match the
surpassed
energy
them.
level.
You
Yeah,
surpassed them completely.
yeah, very generous, very gracious words, but I enjoyed every bit of it. I had fun.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Lovely
Thank you, and
being together. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to the audience for joining us on a Saturday afternoon. Stay tuned. We'll come with more such sessions in future. And please keep encouraging us and motivating us. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye bye.